With the Lies of P Overture trailers that dropped in February, we got our first good looks at the legendary Stalker, who we now know is named Leia. With those looks, we get a very good view of this badge she wears, which appears to be a gold M over a white background with a golden border, all superimposed over a red rose. While this badge has some important implications in Lies of P, it also reminded me of a real-life emblem that led me to a couple of theories. 1. This badge is reference to said real-life emblem and related events, and 2. Those references might be a thread that leads us to another major children's novel that people have been hoping for in Lies of P. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Long before the events of Lies of P, Krat was ruled by noble families that have become known as the Old Families of Krat in more current times. However, as the alchemists of the Isle rediscovered Ergo and its potential in the city, they began moving in and setting up shop, injecting new money into the area, but greatly upsetting the established balance of power in Krat. This of course caused conflict with the old families, but to what extent we aren't given much detail. Given what we do know about these two factions, I would guess it got violent at times. A major attempt to smooth over these tensions was made. Valentinus Monad, then leader of the Alchemists of the Isle, married a lady of one of the major noble families of Krat, Lady Isabel. We aren't directly given her maiden name, but given how things are stated to be named in Krat, Rose or Rosa would be the safe bets. Regardless, the rose is the main symbol of her prenuptial family. While the marriage no doubt had some effect on softening relations between the alchemists and the old families, due to the still existing tensions between the bastards and the sweepers, we know it wasn't 100% effective. There was likely a need for the alchemists to continue to broadcast unity, and this badge we see on Leia may have been part of that. The M is undoubtedly an insignia of the Monad family, while the rose is a symbol of Isabel's family. A combination of the old symbol and the new. This symbolically promotes a desire for a peaceful union between the two factions, rather than erasure of the old. This badge very much reminds me of a real-life English royal emblem that came to be under quite similar circumstances. The Tudor Rose. The Wars of the Roses, to grossly oversimplify, were a set of wars fought between the House of Lancaster, with the support of the House of Tudor, and the House of York over the English throne in the 15th century. The civil wars were named as such because the Yorks wore and were symbolized by white rose badges, while the Lancasters supposedly used red roses. More on that in a second. The wars ended with the male Lancaster line wiped out, the Yorks defeated, and Henry Tudor taking the throne as Henry VII, marking the beginning of the Tudor dynasty. Henry married Elizabeth of York, effectively uniting what was left of the warring houses by marriage. The Wars of the Roses had lasted over 30 years and followed on the heels of the 100 Years' War with France. The idea of peace and stability in England was a pretty popular one at the time, and Henry's hold on the throne was less than secure. While he took tangible precautions to protect his claim to the throne, Henry also sought to harness the power of symbolism to strengthen the perceived union of the houses and project the narrative of himself as a peacebringer. He retroactively assigned red roses to the House of Lancaster, who in reality wore golden rose emblems sometimes, and combined it with the white rose of the House of York. The new emblem of the white rose superimposed on the red rose became known as the Tudor Rose, a symbol of the Houses of York and Lancaster being unified as one family. While the badge the legendary Stalker wears doesn't feature a flower on a flower like the Tudor Rose, it was an interesting and seemingly purposeful choice to make the background white on the Monad part, when all the other Monad badges we have seen so far have been blue. This, of course, wouldn't be the first Lies of P badge referencing a real-life emblem. I'm quite convinced that her badge is a reference to the Tudor Rose, but I wonder how deep that reference could go. Is it a superficial design reference, or is there more to it than that? Could Krat have had its own War of Roses? Maybe not on quite such a grand scale, but maybe a smaller, quieter one with stalkers. After all, we don't know yet what the legendary Stalker did that made her so legendary. Maybe she was the peacebringer in Krat. Lewis Carroll undoubtedly wrote Alice's Adventures in Wonderland for children. This is obvious even without going into the backstory of how the story was literally crafted for the children in his personal life, including Alice Liddell, the young girl for whom the titular character is named. However, Along with all the delightful nonsense, eccentric characters, and playful poems and songs, it's commonly thought that Carroll also included allusions to real-life English figures and historical events that some think may have been included for the parents who would inevitably be forced to read the story to their children. One of the best known and most accepted examples of this is the painting of mistakenly planted white roses red in the Queen of Hearts garden in Chapter 8, which is meant to allude to the Wars of the Roses. Further, although the Queen of Hearts is commonly thought to be partially based on Queen Victoria, despite Carroll denying this, although he probably had to as she was the reigning queen at the time, it's also thought she might be based on Queen Margaret, who was a major leader of the House of Lancaster during the Wars of the Roses. In fact, the Queen of Hearts catchphrase, "off with her head," is thought by some to have come from Shakespeare's version of Queen Margaret in his play Henry VI, which is also based on the Wars of the Roses. Two of Queen Margaret's most notable quotes from the play involve beheading. "Off with the crown, and with it, off with his head," and "off with his head, and put it on the gates of York, so that York's head may look over the town of York." So what does this mean for Lies of P? Well, for one, I think if the Legendary Stalker's badge is a reference to the Tudor Rose, which again I think is likely, the reference could be superficial, or in a world where we know storybook characters exist, it could give us a tangible link between Alice's adventures in Wonderland and Lies of P through the Wars of the Roses. Is this a hint at a possible Alice-based game down the road? I'm not sure. I've seen a lot of people asking, excited for the idea of one, as the ghost of American McGee's Alice Madness Returns often haunts the discussions of future Lies of P content, but I definitely think such a game would be way down the road, as The Wizard of Oz is set for the sequel. I'm more wondering if this is a clue towards a reference to come, if this could be a string that ties Sophia's mother's side of the family to Carroll's Queen of Hearts. We know that the family has a history of listeners, with both Sophia and her mother Isabel being one. We also know that Ergo is made of both time and memories. In Sophia, we've seen a listener gifted in the manipulation of the time part of Ergo, but maybe there's other listeners in her family that were better at influencing the memory portion. Maybe using this power to mess with people's minds resulted in madness, a common theme in Alice's adventures. Maybe this is why Lady Isabel had such a distaste for her power and referred to it as the devil's power. Maybe the Queen of Hearts was part of Isabel's line, and her "off with her head" is a little bit less literal than a beheading.